Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Adam. Sometimes, the end of a marriage doesn't come with shouting or big fights. Sometimes it ends quietly. I'd been married to Margaret for 4 years when it all fell apart. For years of love, plans, and dreams, all of it suddenly felt fake. I had thought we were building something substantial, something lasting. But apparently, it hadn't meant as much to Margaret as it did to me. Whatever thrill or attention she found with that man at work was enough for her to risk everything we'd built. Margaret and I had met when I was 27 and she was 24. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party downtown. I remember how we talked for hours that night about music, our jobs, even childhood stories. It felt like we had known each other for years. We exchanged numbers before we left the event and started dating a few months later. The chemistry was strong, and things moved quickly. About 2 years later, we rented a 2-bedroom apartment in South Austin. We split the bills, shared the chores, and built a simple, steady life together. We both worked long hours, but made time for each other. Weekends were for grocery runs, brunches, and lazy Netflix nights. After 2.5 years of dating, we got married. It was a small destination wedding in Cabo San Lucas, just family and close friends. The sun, the sea, the promises, it all felt perfect. When we came back to Austin, life went on much the same as before. The only difference was the rings on our fingers and the quiet sense that we'd finally made it official. The first few years of our marriage were full of warmth. We both had busy jobs, but we made a point of coming home and cooking dinner together most nights. On weekends, we'd explore new restaurants around Austin or try food trucks. Sometimes we just stayed home, ordered takeout, and watched movies in our pajamas. We had a good circle of friends, other couples we'd hang out with for dinners or small get-togethers. Life felt balanced, comfortable, stable, and full of promise. During this time of our marriage, Margaret and I fit well together. I was more analytical and reserved, while she was open, expressive, and social. Where I hesitated, she spoke up. Where she rushed ahead, I helped her slow down and think things through. We made a good team. We had similar values about money, family, and what kind of life we wanted to build. It felt like we were growing in the same direction. Of course, our relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship is. We had the usual disagreements that every couple faces. But these arguments were small things, never explosive, never anything that hinted at deeper problems. Our intimacy was healthy too, especially in the early years. We were affectionate, little touches, stolen kisses, and late-night cuddles on the couch. We had a good sex life, not just physical but emotional, the kind of closeness that makes you feel safe and desired at the same time. Then, around our 3rd year of marriage, I noticed a subtle change in Margaret. At first, it was easy to ignore, but the changes kept growing. She became less affectionate. The casual touches that used to come naturally became infrequent. It was like a habit she was trying to remember rather than the gestures she wanted to make. She also seemed distracted when we talked, often scrolling through her phone during conversations, responding with half-listening mm-hms. Sometimes she'd forget things I had told her only a day before. It felt like her mind was somewhere else, even when she was sitting right beside me. When I asked about her day, her answers grew vague. She used to tell me everything, but gradually, her responses became short and empty. It felt like she was building a wall, separating her work life from me, from us. Emotionally, she was withdrawing too. Physical intimacy also faded. She began turning down sex, saying she was tired, stressed, or not feeling well. What used to be a regular, loving part of our marriage slowly disappeared. Weeks went by without any affection beyond polite goodnights. And when we did make love, it felt empty, like she was going through the motions to avoid a conversation. I initially thought it was just a phase that every married couple goes through. I tried to be patient and give her space instead of putting pressure on her. In my head, I thought being understanding was the right thing to do. As the weeks turned into months with no change between us, I decided I couldn't just wait for things to fix themselves. I thought maybe I wasn't doing enough, that if I put in more effort, showed her how much she mattered, maybe she'd open up again. So I started trying harder. I'd stop by the store after work to pick up her favorite snacks. I brought her flowers for no reason. I planned small surprises, dinners at her favorite restaurants, movie nights, or quick weekend getaways. I wanted her to see that I still cared, that our marriage still meant something to me. I even suggested we try new hobbies together, cooking classes, dance lessons, and little trips to nearby cities. I thought maybe if we created new memories, it might bring back the closeness we'd lost. She would agree to some and decline some, saying she was too tired or too busy. When it came to intimacy, I tried to be gentle and patient. I didn't want her to feel pressured. I wanted her to know I still desired her. I'd compliment her more often, tell her she looked beautiful, and touch her hand when we talked. I was trying to rebuild what once came naturally to us. But her reactions were flat. Sometimes her responses felt rehearsed, as if she were pretending to be interested to avoid confrontation. It was as if she were playing the part of a loving wife rather than actually being one. Still, I didn't give up. I believed marriage took work. That love meant sticking around and fighting for the relationship, even when it felt one-sided. But inside, I was getting worried. I started wondering if I was the problem, if I'd done something to push her away. Maybe I'd failed her in ways I couldn't see. Yet, I kept telling myself things would get better. They had to. The distance between us grew, but I refused to think the worst. I didn't let myself imagine she might be cheating. Sure, some things were suspicious, the sudden privacy with her phone, the emotional distance, the lack of intimacy, but I kept the thought aside. Not every cold marriage meant infidelity. This remained our new normal, until the day I got a message from Connor. Connor worked in HR at Margaret's company. I knew him only casually. We'd chatted a few times at her work events, but we weren't close. His text was short and strange. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something sensitive. Can we meet privately? It's about Margaret." My heart sank. My first thought was that something had happened to her, some issue at work. I replied, asking what it was about, but he said it had to be an in-person conversation. We agreed to meet 2 days later. When I arrived, Connor was already there. As soon as I sat down, he got straight to the point. He told me rumors were going around at Margaret's office. People were whispering that she was having an affair with one of her coworkers. I immediately shut it down. I told him he was wrong, that Margaret would never do that, that people love to gossip and twist stories. I said there was no proof that she wasn't that kind of person. Connor looked pained. He said he'd hoped the same, that he hadn't wanted to believe it either. But since he worked in HR, he had to look into the claims. And what he found worried him enough that he thought I deserved to know before things became public. He opened his laptop and showed me an internal HR folder, documents I definitely wasn't supposed to see. In it was a written statement from an employee who had stayed late one night. The person said they saw Margaret and a man named Brandon from the sales department, alone in a conference room after hours. Then Connor clicked to a still frame from the building's security footage. The timestamp was from a couple of weeks earlier. The sight hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the screen, my mind trying to reject what my eyes were seeing. From Connor, I found out the investigation was still ongoing. How HR hadn't confronted them yet because they needed to gather enough evidence, but I barely heard him. All I could see was my wife in another man's arms. All I could feel was the world collapsing quietly inside me. I drove home that evening feeling completely numb. It was as if everything was happening to someone else, and I was just standing there watching it unfold. The reality hadn't fully settled in yet. My mind was blank except for a low hum of disbelief that kept repeating, "This can't be real." When I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't bring myself to go inside. I just sat there in the car with the engine off. I must have sat there for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Every part of me resisted walking through that front door, knowing what I now knew. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car. The air felt colder than usual. Inside, the house was quiet. Margaret wasn't home yet. Probably still at work, or maybe with Brandon. The thought made my stomach turn. I went to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. That was the moment something inside me broke. All the distance I had felt from her over the past few months suddenly made sense. It wasn't stress, it wasn't work, it was someone else taking my place. Margaret came home around 8. I heard her keys in the door. I couldn't bring myself to walk out and look at her. Not yet. She eventually appeared in the doorway of our room, and we said a quiet hello to each other. That night, I couldn't sleep beside her. The idea of lying that close to her, breathing the same air, was unbearable. I took a pillow and blanket to the couch. By morning, the numbness had hardened into something colder. Every memory of us together now felt twisted, tainted by what I knew. I'd been living in a lie. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. I lost all desire to fix things, all respect for her, all hope that our marriage could ever be saved. The emotional connection I'd been holding onto, even through all the distance, was gone in an instant. After that, I stopped trying. No more hugs when she walked by. No more small talk. No more asking about her day or pretending to care about anything. I started cooking for myself, eating alone, washing my own dishes, leaving hers untouched. I stopped checking in, stopped making plans, stopped doing anything that made us feel like a couple. I became a ghost in my own house. When she spoke, I replied with one-word answers. Fine. Sure. Whatever. Nothing more. I started leaving for work earlier than I needed to. Sometimes I'd just sit in my car, drive around, or stop at a cafe to kill time before heading to the office. I came home late, too, after she'd eaten, just to avoid sitting across from her. Even looking at her was painful. Meeting her eyes meant acknowledging that she was no longer my wife, as she once was. It was easier not to look all. For days after Connor showed me the evidence, I contacted a divorce lawyer. I booked a consultation, went over the details, and began the legal process of ending my marriage. I filed the papers quietly, without telling Margaret. I wanted everything ready before she even knew what was coming. I wanted to be far along in the process before she realized I was leaving her for good. I started looking for apartments even before the divorce process began. Every corner of our house felt heavy now, tainted, like the air itself carried the memory of betrayal. It was like living inside a crime scene where my marriage had been murdered. I just wanted out as soon as it was legally and financially possible. After about a week of complete withdrawal, Margaret began to notice. She'd ask what was wrong, try to start conversations, hover near me like she was searching for warmth that no longer existed. Her tone was gentle at first, then worried. One evening, she reached out and touched my arm. I immediately pulled away. I couldn't stand her touch anymore. Her questions became more desperate. Every time, my answer was the same. I'm fine. Then I'd walk away. I refused to give her the emotional connection she had so easily thrown away. The same connection she'd once promised to protect. I stopped looking at her when she spoke. If she came into a room, I left. If she tried to talk, I'd put on my headphones and tune her out completely. After a few nights, I moved to the couch permanently and never went back to our bed. I didn't pretend it was temporary. It became my new space, my quiet island of distance. Soon, we were like strangers living under the same roof. My silence hurt her more than any shouting ever could. I could see it in the way she looked at me, her confusion, her guilt, her growing fear. But I felt nothing. No pity. She had created this. By the third week of living like that, I knew it was time to finish what I'd started. That evening, she was sitting on the couch watching TV when I walked in. I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of her. My voice was calm, almost quiet. Sign when you're ready, I said, or get your own lawyer. Then I turned and walked to the bedroom to keep packing my things. Behind me, I heard her sharp breath, the sound of papers being lifted and unfolded. Then silence as she read what I had filed. A few seconds later, her voice came. Adam, what is this? I didn't answer. I didn't even look back. I just kept folding my clothes. She followed me to the doorway, clutching the documents in her hand. Why are you doing this? What happened? Talk to me. For the first time in weeks, I looked her straight in the eyes. Without any emotion, I responded, "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "Just sign the papers or get a lawyer. Your choice." She looked shattered. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "You've been so distant for weeks. Is that what this is about?" I said nothing. She kept begging for an answer, for any clue as to what had changed. Finally, her voice cracked as she asked, "Why don't you want me anymore?" I paused, looked at her, and said quietly, "Because you gave away what was mine." She froze. The recognition in her eyes told me she understood exactly what I meant. She tried to lie, but her voice faltered, and the panic in her eyes said everything she didn't. I went back to doing what I was doing, refusing to say another word. I was done with the conversation, done with her excuses, her denials, and all the emotional manipulation. Margaret slid down against the doorframe, her whole body shaking as she cried. I could see the guilt and fear crash over her all at once, like reality had finally hit her. Over the next few days, she tried everything she could think of. She apologized over and over, even though I never said exactly what I knew. She begged me to let her explain, swearing it had been a mistake, that she still loved me and wanted our marriage. I wanted no part of it. Every time she entered a room, I left. If she tried to talk, I put in my headphones and ignored her. When she cornered me, I walked right out of the house. When she realized I wouldn't talk in person, she started sending long text messages, paragraph after paragraph. Each one was filled with apologies, promises, and emotional pleas. She said she couldn't sleep, that she would do anything to fix things, that I was her whole life. I didn't reply to a single message. I forwarded them to my attorney to keep everything documented. Margaret then tried another route, mutual friends. She reached out to them, hoping they could convince me to talk to her or agree to counseling before going through with the divorce. I stayed calm, polite, and firm. I told them my decision was final, and that I'd appreciate it if they respected my boundaries. 2 weeks after she was served with the divorce papers, I moved out while she was at work. I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town, packed my things, and by the time she came home, I was gone entirely, not a trace left behind. From that day forward, the only communication between us went through our attorneys. I blocked her number, her email, and any other way she could reach me. I made it clear that all contact must go through legal channels only. About 12 weeks later, in the middle of the divorce process, Margaret's company finished their internal investigation. They called her and her coworker, Brandon, in for formal meetings. The HR department laid out all the evidence, witness statements, security footage, message logs, and a full timeline of their affair. Both were fired for violating company policy on workplace relationships and for inappropriate conduct. The documentation was thorough, leaving no room for denial. Margaret's career fell apart when news spread fast. Everyone knew she'd been fired over an office affair, and that kind of reputation was impossible to shake. It would follow her everywhere she went. She tried reaching out again after losing her job, wanting to talk about how everything had fallen apart, her marriage, her work, her social life. She said she needed someone to talk to, someone to understand. But I didn't respond. Her choices had consequences, and those consequences were hers alone. I wasn't her comfort anymore. While her life seemed to spiral out of control, I stayed steady. I focused on rebuilding my own life, one piece at a time. I heard later that she had moved back in with her parents. Many of our former friends had sided with me or quietly stepped away from the drama altogether. My heart was finished. I felt nothing for Margaret anymore. The woman I had once loved with everything I had was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. The person who betrayed me was a stranger wearing her face. At that point, I wasn't mourning the end of our marriage. That had already happened the moment I saw the security footage. I was simply going through the legal process that made our emotional ending official. The divorce lasted about 11 months. Texas law required a 60-day waiting period after filing, and the rest of the time was spent sorting out money and property. We kept things mostly simple. Our savings were divided equally. We each kept our own cars, and there were no fights over furniture or personal items. I took what I needed for my new apartment. She kept the rest. We sold the house and split the security deposit after moving out. It was all business, no emotion left to argue over. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday afternoon. Both of our lawyers were there. Margaret and I sat in the same room for the first time in months. The air was heavy but silent. We signed the final papers without saying a word to each other. As we stood to leave, she turned to me. Her eyes were filled with tears, her voice trembling as she tried to speak. I met her gaze briefly and said only, "Take care of yourself, Margaret." Then I walked out of that conference room, and out of her life, for good. Looking back now, since the divorce was finalized, I see things much more clearly. I've learned that emotional distance can sometimes be the only healthy response to betrayal. Anger and confrontation might feel satisfying in the moment, but silence can say more. By staying calm and walking away, I showed her exactly how deeply she had lost me. I've learned that infidelity destroys trust in a way that can never truly be repaired. Margaret's affair didn't just hurt me. It erased the foundation of everything we had built. Some betrayals end relationships instantly, and that's simply the truth. I've also learned that people often panic when they realize they've lost something they thought was guaranteed. Margaret had assumed I would always be there, that she could drift away and still find me waiting. My complete silence and withdrawal scared her more than shouting ever could. And yes, consequences always arrive eventually. She lost her marriage, her job, and the reputation she'd worked so hard to build. Watching her life crumble from a distance was enough closure for me. I didn't need revenge. Life handled that on its own. Most importantly, I learned that I deserve honesty and loyalty. Staying with her after what I saw would have meant accepting betrayal, and I refused to do that. Walking away was how I protected my self-respect. You might think I was too cold, that I should have confronted her face to face or listened to her side of the story before filing for divorce. But I disagree. I owed her nothing after watching her kiss another man. She made her choices. I made mine. People I know have told me I handled it perfectly, that my calm, silent exit was the most dignified way to respond. Maybe they're right. Maybe not. But I'm at peace with it. I did what felt right for me. Confrontation wouldn't have changed anything. Silence said everything that needed to be said. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? And if this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching.